This video is not a case study. There's a lot of stuff that I cover in this video that I want people who I'm hoping to work with to understand about me, how I work, what's possible, and how I see design working in an AI-enabled world. So, with that pretext out of the way, what am I going to be talking about? Well, I'm going to be talking about this thing right here. So in 2019, 7 years ago, I built a Figma prototype for what I ended up calling Mobile Trader. So I'd been learning day trading for a long time, up to that point, a long time, a year and a half. And I had learned a lot. And I thought, what would be a fun challenge to myself? Something that's probably impossible, but I can try to make as good of a design as possible given that impossible task. Well, if you're a day trader, you're glued to your screen, you usually have at least a few monitors, sometimes 4, 6, 8 monitors, watching charts all over the place. You have a keyboard with all sorts of keyboard shortcuts for different strategies, for entrances and exits, for sizing, for locating shares to short stocks. You're looking at news items. You're watching various filters or lists that you have made, all sorts of stuff. So I thought, okay, what if I could try to enable that kind of ability on just a tiny mobile screen? So that's the context behind this. Now, when I was going through some of my old portfolios last week, I found a screenshot, which you'll see right here. And I was really curious how that old prototype held up. It was a real spaghetti monster. There were connections all over the place because I had made as much as possible really reactive and usable for someone testing out this prototype. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to it. The whole Figma file is gone. And yeah, all that I have left, all that remains, is this screenshot that I took for one of my portfolio pieces, just mentioning it briefly. So I thought, why don't I just make the app? So I spent a day working on it. Now it was a long work day. I think it may have been 14 hours, but I spent one day building a mobile app based on this screen and my memory of how everything is supposed to work, and also chasing down some rabbit holes. Real quick, just before I show the actual app, I want to talk about what's all on this screen here. So at the top, we've got the ticket, Amazon, could be Netflix, Tesla, whatever. There's a list for adding to, or a button to add to a list. ETB stands for easy to borrow. If you're not into trading, don't worry about it. It just means that you can short a stock. If you don't know what that means, it means you can sell it before you buy it. Weird. There's the price. This is the price of Amazon at that time. And then here we've got chart, depth, news, and stats. So these are 4 different windows, basically, that you could either tap on these tabs or swipe left and right. This showed your buying power, so how much you have to use to purchase and sell stocks. And then we've got the chart here. So if you clicked on depth, there would be something else. News would show something else. Going down here, this is a button set, which you could edit, but this allows you to, again, this is the short. That's you're able to sell before you buy, or cover. If it were the long momentum set, then it would be buy and sell. And then you had all sorts of options that you pick from for canceling orders, locating, setting a break-even point, other things besides buying and selling, shorting and covering. All right, and then, yeah, this was a side-scrolling space down here where you could have an infinite number of strategies, which would result in different button sets. And these have the little carrots because for any particular strategy, you're going to have different sizings and different price offsets, things like that, that you would want to have preset. So you tap that, it would bring up some options, and you select the option that you want, and that actually, does the short or the purchase. And then we've got the nav bar at the bottom. There's the main trading screen, logs for what orders you've made, etc. List of things like you can add to a list or create a list here, and then alerts for setting or viewing existing alerts, and then more for basically settings. Okay, so that's everything. Now let me show you the app that I built based on that. So almost the same thing. And again, I want to stress that I built this in a day from scratch, not because I'm showing off what I could do individually, although sure, yeah, but more so, I want to talk about something. I believe that every product designer already this is happening, but it's only certain companies and certain roles within those companies that this currently exists. But I think in 2027, this is going to become commonplace, that every product designer of note will also be the equivalent of a junior front-end developer at a minimum. AI has enabled so many capabilities and processes that any company that does not leverage those processes and those capabilities is going to fall behind. They're going to be slow. They're going to release lower quality products slower. But it's not just about the building, but I'll get into the other stuff later. What I did right here was I used Claude Code to build an app from scratch just based on this one screenshot that I shared with Claude Code. It wasn't even a Figma file. This is just a screenshot, this thing right here. I shared that, and I had a bunch of things from memory that I remembered how actions should take place and why I made certain decisions, which led to me changing some things in certain ways because the original intent was not best served by this. After 7 more years of experience, I realized, why don't we do things differently, and things like that. Anyway, the reason why it's important for me to point out that I was able to do this all by myself in one day is that there's no reason why designers in an organization should not have access to the code repo. And there's a few different levels to this. The ideal level is your designers are actively contributing to the code base. They are cloning the repo, branching, committing, pushing, making pull requests, and actually updating the code base. They're doing it responsibly. So to start off, you're going to have your designers on training wheels and a ton of oversight from developers. But over time, you will require less and less direct oversight. There'll still be reviews of the pull requests and everything. But this is what I'm talking about, where I think we're heading, where every designer is going to effectively be a junior developer. On top of a junior developer with design taste, basically. Now, like I said, the pinnacle, the ideal, is designers actively contributing to the code base. But below that, Maybe they don't actually contribute. Maybe you're not ready for that, or you think it's unnecessary and we can do without that. Okay. It's still going to be worth your while to allow your designers to have access to the code base, clone it, and work with it. Because one of the big problems that happens often historically is a designer will create this experience and it's wonderful in Figma. You have an amazing layout, prototype, everything. It works very smoothly, and there's some really nifty effects and everything is positioned perfectly. But when it comes time to implement it, things are no longer aligned properly. That one animation isn't working like you expected. There's an entire component that's missing for some reason, thing after thing after thing. And why does that happen? Well, because the designer doesn't know that the things in the code base are either completely different, they're missing, they're not working properly, any number of things. Or, maybe they're there. They're technically correct. They are working properly, hypothetically, but not in the way that the designer understands them to be working. If the designer has access to the code base and is able to implement their design solutions and test to see how that works, then that's leagues better than the old way of doing things. They don't even need to actively contribute to the code base. Just doing that gets you so far ahead, and only the designer knows exactly what they're looking for. Often, historically, you hand something off to a developer, the developer implements it, and it's wrong in half a dozen important ways, but the developer doesn't know how or why it's wrong. As far as the developer understands, they did their job, and technically they did. And you can't blame the developer for not knowing what to look for, because the designer is the one with that training, that expertise, and the one who put the recipe together. The designer is the chef, and it's hard to know sometimes what things you are assuming when you are designing an experience. Giving your designers access to the code base and the tools and the training to be able to build their own experiences takes out all of the guesswork. So the designer can then, if there's something wrong, they can either decide, okay, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to do it that way, or I'm going to recommend an upgrade to the code base in some way. Here's a new component, or here's a tweak to the existing component, whatever the case may be. Okay, so I said there's levels. Top level, active contribution to the code base. Level below that, they're not contributing to the code base, but they can pull from it and use it and test against it. The level below that, at least allow your designers and train them to be able to build their own experiences from scratch, like I did with this. They can try to replicate as closely as possible what you have, in the actual code base. At the very least, for instance, if your company is building or has a mobile app built on React Native, which is what this one is, then at least they'll know that when you tell the developer to do X or Y thing, well, they tried to do it themselves in React, and it doesn't quite work the same way that it does in Figma when you do a prototype. They will have that knowledge. They will have that understanding because they built it themselves, and they know with authority what happens. Okay, let me now show off the app a bit. So yeah, we've got the screens that can be swiped, and this was important. I'm starting in the center for some reason instead of the top like I did over here. This was important to me because I wanted the experience for the day trader to be able to quickly do things in whichever way is most natural for them in the moment. Okay. There's a few things that were super duper important, more important than anything else for this project if I wanted it to be a success. One of them was being able to cram all of this information and all of these actions into a mobile screen, okay? So I needed a high ink to value ratio. Now, another thing though was speed. I needed to enable the user to do things as quickly as possible. And there's some tensions between these things. High information load and speed, you can easily overload with information and people aren't able to find the right things. Or if you over-index on speed, you have to make compromises with all the information. But another one was, I would say, fidelity of action. So the user needed to be able to make fine-grade actions and decisions in the moment with speed. So, speed, accuracy, and complete information, all of that. You can't ever make a perfect experience for all of those three, but you can maximize those as much as possible. And yeah, being able to swipe or tap was my way to be flexible for the end user. And the swiping, I imagine, would be more natural typically because the user, they're going to spend most of the time on the chart. And their thumbs are going to be ready to press short or cover or one of these other things down here. Okay, so their thumbs are down here and they're probably cradling the phone like this. So their thumbs aren't going to easily reach up to chart depth news, but they could reach up just another inch or half inch and swipe left and right, That was the thinking behind that. And then, so we've got the different candles as well. 1 minute, 5 minutes, whatever. Let's do 1 day. There we go. And this is all real information. This app is effectively real. It's pulling from my Alpaca account. So the data is real. When it's not closed and I'm not in demo mode, I am sending and receiving to my paper account. But you can zoom in or zoom out. There we go. Wow, Netflix has been crazy. Okay. But here's a typical use case perhaps. Let's say they're looking at the 5-minute chart, which is pretty typical, and they're kind of zoomed in probably about like that so that they can get a sense of the pattern that's developing. This is a bullish signal here with that candle pattern and this volume. And that turned out to be moving up. Cool. Anyway, so they're watching these things happen, and real quick, they want to look at the depth. Okay. So maybe they made the decision that, okay, this kind of pattern is forming. I'm going to wait until a certain number of actions or asks and bids are cleared, and then I'll buy on that one. So that's what flicking your thumb left and right to get information real quick. That's also why things were ordered in this way, where the news takes the furthest. It takes 2 swipes to get there because the news isn't going to be changing very often. In the moment, in the heat of the moment, you're looking at the chart, you're probably either going to look at the depth from there or the stats. Okay, moving up. I moved buying power from here, right? This tiny little thing in the corner of the chart to here. And I don't want to take too much time. This is already going to be a meandering, really long video. But I did that, number one, because then it's no longer a floating mechanic here. And I ended up replacing that essentially with the time unit selector. But also it just looked better, and it was a nice, I really actually, here's another thing, another reason to have designers build experiences and not just design them. The agent that I was working with was working in stages, and the agent was eventually going to get around to putting it this way. But initially he just, no, let's call him he. Why not? He placed it like he placed everything without, the layering. And I didn't like it at first, but it really grew on me. And one of the reasons that it grew on me was especially this line right here. So this line reflects, it starts out green if you're full or have most of your buying power, and then it goes to yellow, orange, red over time. Divided into quartiles. So this signals how much buying power I have left, and I really liked the idea of having a more obvious change in color here. Okay, but yeah, we've got the ticker symbol, which you can search for other tickers. What should I look up? Facebook, maybe. Oops, I was typing. I forgot that I turned that off. There we go. Wait, did Facebook change their... Are they meta? They're probably meta now. Wow, you can tell it's been a while. Okay, yeah, there we go. Well, that's some price action there. All right. Sorry, now I'm curious. Ooh. Huh. Okay. I did not wire up the list. I did not do anything beyond this trading screen. That's all I had time for in one day. But all of this information is real. And, oh, I can turn on demo mode here. Okay, and demo mode exists purely just so that while I'm demoing, I can give myself or anyone watching a sense for what it's like when things are really moving. Right now, Eastern Standard Time, it's 3:30 in the morning, so not much would be happening. I've got most of my buying power tied up, so let me cover. I'll just dump it all. Oh, right, I'm on the wrong. Let's go back to Netflix. Notice this shows my position in the name, the ticker. Okay, so now, there we go. That's more like it. Oh, I made some money. Cool. All right. Yeah, like I said, you can do the side scrolling here. And one difference here is in the old version, that was much smaller. And this was a long time ago. And I realized I needed to make that a bigger hit target. Even though it's like a tertiary movement, you need to have the ability to have the proper target aligned in the heat of the moment without doing a bunch of guesswork and accidentally pressing things. That's also why the buttons are ordered in these certain ways, so that if you are a little bit off here, you're not buying and selling. And that's also another reason for these to open the panel, in addition to needing to really package all of your options like this. It also prevents you from accidentally, doing a fat thumb move and shorting a stock that you really didn't intend to. The menu at the bottom, I did an update as well. These aren't changing because, like I said, I didn't build these in day one. But it's a much more modern version of the menu, and it also allows me to set this lower. And otherwise, by default, it adds a whole bunch of space here, which wasn't necessary for the modern iPhones. I also added a little conversion optimization here. So this is actually what I would do. I would add this Copilot feature as a user benefit because it would be super helpful. And yeah, I think that's everything that I want to cover there. Oh, I also decided that I was going to make these buttons less pill-shaped and more rounded. For a few reasons. One, purely aesthetic, but also maximizing hit area for these buttons. But going back to the aesthetics, I decided I wanted to be less minimalist. I'm a huge fan of minimalism, and I have been for a really long time. And this was in 2019, this one here. Robinhood was the soup of the day, and I leaned on that. Oh, yeah. By the way, I made the purposeful decision for these to not be red and green because I wanted the user, the day trader, to have absolute focus. This is a fourth key guideline principle. The day trader needed to have absolute focus on only what matters. And, when the chart is on, the day trader needs to be watching the ticks, the candles, what's happening, what's moving up and down. If there's a bunch of red and green things elsewhere, little exception here, I'll get into that. But yeah, if there's reds and greens all over the place, then there's competing factions for what your eye is supposed to be looking at. Then that's not good. So I made all of the buttons, with the exception of on here, you're in the moment, and that's different. But otherwise, all of the buttons are pure grayscale. I wanted to do some explorations of other ways to approach it from a visual standpoint, an aesthetic standpoint. And I was inspired by a recent post on LinkedIn by someone called Eric Lee. And he had noted that maybe I'll just bring it up. Hold on. I'm going to pause. Okay, here's the post in question. Let me zoom in a bit. So the long and short of it is that technology enables and encourages certain trends in design. And he points out how skeuomorphism really came about because Photoshop and to a lesser extent Illustrator allowed the ability to add these textures and play with gradients in ways that previously was not. It was always possible, but not easy to do. And that gave us skeuomorphism. Now, several years ago, they tried to make neumorphism a thing, and it didn't quite land. And I think the reason for that is because the technology, there hadn't been a significant technology shift. So there was never going to be like all of the designers starting to do things in a certain way because there wasn't anything that was enabling a new level of activity. We have a totally new level of enablement now for designers to do almost anything. So, given that, what are the new trends going to be? And there's a lot of them that, in my opinion, are really just distracting for end users. And especially that I was working on a mobile trader application where focus is key and information density is super important and being able to act with speed and fidelity. I couldn't be distracting people. That was going to be a terrible thing for the end user. So a lot of the really fancy things were off the table, okay? And probably for the best because I might have been tempted to go too far. But I was still inspired by skeuomorphism, or at least the idea of introducing realness to the buttons and shapes and actions. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my cursor thing. Okay, so after doing some exploration, I'll talk about the background and the context of what I did. But this is where I landed, and this was where I ended up at the end of the workday, where it was like it was 10 or 11 at night, and I decided I'm stopping. I'll come back to this later, but for now, this is as far as I'm going with this project. But yeah, where I landed, and again, this is it's a mobile app, so I can't play with hover states. Okay, so that's off the table. But what I can do, and there's two things that I can do primarily. One is the static visual presentation. Okay, so you see these buttons, they've got some depth to them. Then this is where the inspiration from skeuomorphism is coming into play. However, it is toned down. There's not this weird glossy glass effect, and hopefully it's not taking the user's attention away from the action too much. This is a more traditional prototype. It's not an app. There's some activity, but nothing's connected here. Anyway, yeah, so this is the aesthetic feel that I was going for, and that's the static visual that I settled on. But the other thing that I could really lean into is the activity, the animation. And that's where I was thinking, maybe the way to do skeuomorphism new would be focusing on the action, the animation, instead of the static aspect of it. So I really honed in on what happens when I push a button. What I was going for was trying to get a feeling out of the press. And that feeling is your TV remote control, those buttons. They're kind of rubbery, plasticky. It's soft, but there's give to it, but at the same time, it's really solid, That was the intention behind this and why I was making the buttons have this kind of action. So it's subtle enough that if you're in the heat of trading and you're tapping these buttons, they're not going to distract you. But it's obvious enough that if you're paying attention at all, you notice it. And even if you're not paying attention, hopefully you feel it a bit. That was the idea. And once I made these changes, it was obvious that the rest of the setup needed to be updated because there were 2 or 3 different design languages being spoken on the same screen now. So actually the last thing that I did was update much of the rest of this view so that it felt like it was all part of the design language, or at least much more than previously. Okay, so now I'll talk about the purely design aspect and how I was working. I'm going to try to keep this section short. I basically went into Claude Design and I told Claude Design what I was thinking. I'm a huge fan of minimalism, but I think we're going to move past minimalism. And I want to try to convert, and I shared that same original image with Claude Design. I want to convert this experience, especially the buttons, focusing on those, the order buttons. That was my providing focus to AI is very important. It helps a lot. You can always then extrapolate your lessons to other things from there. But yeah, I gave the whole story of I want to do skeuomorphism, but different. And I, tried to describe what I was going for. And I told it to give me 6 different options. And none of those options were exactly what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted. Here's the important thing. I was using Claude Design as a method to have half a dozen designers give me some design inspiration, basically. And it was great for doing that. I think one of the things that people misunderstand is that they assume that if you're using AI to create designs or edit designs, that you're just having AI design for you. No, I think that doing things like product design, and I think storytelling is probably another one like that. Software if you're a developer, it's a little different. If you're a developer working with AI, I think it's much more a game of scaling. And then you just occasionally go in and you have to fix some things here and there. In broad strokes, I think that's the story. For design, storytelling, things like that, your fingerprint needs to be on things much more. And I think that there is an incorrect understanding among designers today, among many of them, that the way that you leave your fingerprint on things more is by using AI less. No. You want to be using AI as much as possible. Anytime you're doing something by hand, you should be asking yourself, could I have used AI for this instead? Could I have used AI to get 6 options instead of 1 in 1 minute instead of 1 hour? It doesn't mean that you always use AI. I love to draw on marker boards, actually. I take photos of things I drew on marker boards because there's something about the hand movement. It's that something, I don't know, something doesn't translate as well when I'm in a digital product for certain types of things. There's nothing wrong with working in Figma and building your own designs if that is the one way that you can get your inspiration onto something that can then be communicated to, the next level of you, working on the next version, or AI, or stakeholders and collaborators. But you should have a bias for bringing AI into your process as much as possible. There should be ideally a 90-10 relationship. 90% of the time, you're leveraging AI somehow, like my experience where I could have done a whole bunch of ideating all on my own, come up with 1 or 2 or 3 different options, but I had a blank page. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go. So it would have been, in my opinion, a waste of time for me to spend probably several hours putting together 1 or 2 options, really. Because I would have been spinning my wheels for a long time, like looking for inspiration. And like I start doing something, it's like, no, this is all wrong. And instead of that, you can short circuit the whole process. Tell AI, have a conversation with AI. Give me 6 options now. And then what I did from there, because none of them were perfect, but almost all of them had something that was either interesting at the very least, or that I thought could be incorporated in the direction that I wanted to go. And so I gave that nuanced feedback to AI, saying options number 6 and number 4 are the closest. Option 6 has that feel that I want, the overall aesthetic. Option 4, I like the outline and the glow around it. And then, option number 1 and 2 are horrible because of X and Y. Give the AI both positive and feedback for everything. And then, iteration after iteration after iteration. And here's the thing. Sometimes it was really quick and I was able to go, boom, iterate, boom. Other times it takes like 5 minutes for it to do these things. But then I can work on the other aspect. I can be building the other version of this that I'm working on, like the more solid version, and then come back to it. And I'm not switching context between wildly different projects then. It's just I'm operating at different levels on the same project. Okay, so just a few more things. Yeah. Good enough. So this is kind of a series that shows how it developed. So the original screenshot that I did 7 years ago, my build, this is where I got to with the build, which was mostly faithful to the original, but I also changed several things that I thought made sense to update. And then from there, I went into Claude Design and I made really targeted visual updates exclusively on the static and interactive states of elements. I said earlier that it should be a 90-10 split between when you're using AI versus not AI, not using it, in my opinion. Now, one of the things that enables you to lean on AI as much as you would be having systems that the AI can read and understand and leverage when the AI is doing work for you, whether it's more kind of production work or exploratory work. Again, I think that there's an impression that if you're exploring, if you're seeking inspiration, then that's something that you should be doing on your own. Otherwise, it's going to be AI. You can lead AI. You can tell AI what to do. You can give AI guardrails. And the way that you do that is, I have an acronym of TCP: tokens, components, and pros. So you give tokenized experience. You give design tokens, for color, spacing, sizing, for elevation, even for motion. You can make a token for anything. You also have components. You should have a component library that should reference those tokens, of course. And then pros is verbal instructions. These are the general design guidelines. We put this and that type of thing in this type of location. We use these colors generally, but we have exceptions for here, here, and here. And it's where doing explicit token-based or component-based rules just don't quite cut it. Sometimes just giving a general explanation of this is how we do things here is just as important. And that can really allow for a few things. It can allow the AI to be creative without completely doing its own thing. It also allows you to make carve-outs, because no rule is ever perfect. And if you're working in your system and you realize, we have a great general rule, but it doesn't work for such and such case, you can include that in the pros portion of your system, your design system. And AI will be able to help you better and help you in the way that you want it to help you. Now, here is an example of I put together this color aspect of the design system on the fly. Now, since I was building an entire app from scratch, I wasn't being too concerned about encoding everything, and a lot of the stuff was still encoded in tokens. There's a lot of general defaults that you can rely on, especially for things like spacing and radii and everything, of having your buffet of options, your menu in your design system set. But colors are one of the most personality encoding aspects of a design system. And there's different levels that you can go. You can do what I did here. You can go the full JSON with different modes and themes and everything, which, if you have an enterprise app, SaaS app, then I would recommend absolutely go that route. You're going to need the translator for both production, but as well likely when you're operating environments like Claude Design or Figma, the AI or the tool will not be able to handle all of that. Anyway, this is what I put together as I was working on the spot for that 14-hour day. And here's a few things to note. First, there's the chart palette, which I did this research originally. I remember doing it, but I wanted to make sure. So I checked, and this does still these candles, which you need to be able to read the differences in real time, quickly and easily. So for the primary, like the 4%, 5% of the population that suffers from deuteranomaly, then they can still distinguish between these candles reliably. And I did the same thing for, so I call this the chart palette. I had a separate system palette. So even though there's green and red, these are different greens and reds. And this is the system palette that would be used for the buying power, but also for success messages, danger, warning messages, those things. And again, I checked for I have to look at it, Deuteronomy test right here, and that is good enough. I also added a couple others. I did not end up implementing this one, but maybe it'll come back. I don't know. But this is a separate color so that the pro features stand out, such as the Copilot. There we go. And then finally, the neutrals from N0 to N900. And yeah. Oh yeah, another thing, the mobile trader is focused for day traders. Day traders tend to operate in dark mode because it allows them to focus on the candles much better. The N0, so the pure black, is only for shadows and effects, and I have that as a rule for the AI to know as well. So that's encoded. Now, real quick, I want to mention this represents years of study in design systems. I've studied all of the best, and I have an entire system that goes beyond color, but color is the easiest to talk about. I have a buffet that you can select presets to kick off a design system. Now, there are all sorts of plugins and everything that generate these things automatically, but they're never pleasing and WK compatible and all those things. And they just don't have the proper ramp set up. It just doesn't ever work. So, I researched all of the top design systems, and I assembled and made tweaks so that I could pick and choose across. And it gives you then, by default, just pick every third one. So pick that one, and then that one, and then that one, and then that one. And that will give you a design system of 9 colors. And it will give you a breadth and depth it goes across from cold to hot. There's what I call deep and bright colors. And then these are basically recommended columns for, the different semantic types of colors as well. And then there's a more complete neutral band as well. Yeah. What else did I want to cover? I think that's it. This is going to be good enough.